Hello, my name is Talitha Marin, and the night I stopped being my sister's shadow started with a knock that shouldn't have happened. I wasn't waiting for it. I wasn't ready for what was behind it. But once I opened that door, nothing I believed about family, loyalty, or love ever fit the same way again. The knock didn't sound angry. That's what shook me. It was careful, measured, like someone didn't want to bother me, but they had nowhere else to go. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then came the second knock. Softer, but somehow more urgent. I sat up too fast, dizzy from sleep, blinking into the dark. The glow of the alarm clock read 1:04 a.m. I'd gone to bed early. I'd hoped for peace. Instead, I got 3 silhouettes huddled outside my door in mismatched pajamas and no shoes. Joran's voice cracked through the door, like something already broken. "Aunt Talitha?" Just that. By the time I opened the door, they were blue-lipped and silent. Eno wasn't crying. That was worse. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I just moved, pulled them in, shut the door, turned the heat up. Joran's body trembled as I peeled his wet socks off. Kaya's hands were locked around her little brother's wrist like she was still bracing for impact. I thought maybe I was overreacting, that there had to be some mistake. But then I saw the bruises. They weren't the kind that come from running into furniture. They were deliberate, old in color, some yellowed, some newer, fading into each other like layers of quiet stories no one asked to hear. She flinched when I touched her. Not hard, just gently, just a finger on her side. She didn't say a word. "Did you fall?" I asked softly, pretending I didn't already know the answer. She looked at me like I'd said something cruel. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I wrapped them in every blanket I had, sat them near the heater, made tea they wouldn't drink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, but I smiled anyway. That's what adults do when they're trying not to show children how scared they are. Eno was still quiet. He stared at the radiator like he was waiting for it to give him permission to breathe. Joran kept looking at Kaya, watching her like she'd vanish if he looked away. I sat on the floor with them, a mug in my hands that I didn't even sip. The steam felt too hot against my face. I was sweating and freezing all at once. That's when Joran said it. We didn't know where else to go. 6 words. They landed like a confession and a verdict all at once. He didn't look at me when he said it, just stared into the space between his knees and the floor like it could answer for him. My heart didn't break. It twisted, snapped quiet like a rope pulled too tight for too long. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Their socks were frozen to their feet. I'd read about that in books, but I'd never seen it. The fabric had adhered to their skin, especially Eno's. Kaya's left foot was already red and blistering. She winced when I touched it. He didn't. He just let me hold his foot like he was no longer inside his own body. I filled a shallow basin with warm water and placed it by their feet. Worked slowly, carefully. Eno never made a sound. Pain makes you scream. Terror makes you silent. I had known that once. I'd forgotten what it looked like in someone so small. I wrapped him in one of my oldest quilts, the one with worn stitching and soft edges. His body fit in my lap like a memory I didn't want to have. I cradled him, rocking side to side, humming a tune I hadn't sung in years. I don't even know where it came from. Maybe some part of me always knew I'd need it again. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and their shallow breathing. I held Eno tighter, and then came the question I wasn't ready for, but had already asked myself. If this is what I see, what have I missed? I stared down at their frostbitten feet, at bruises on Kaya's back, at Joran, too old, too still for a 12-year-old boy. And I knew this wasn't the first time, just the first time they chose me. I thought I had opened my door to my sister's children. I didn't know I had just stepped into the part of their lives no one else wanted to see. The knock didn't belong to them. It wasn't soft or scared or asking permission. It was heavy, deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't wait to be invited in, but expects the door to open, because it always has. I froze, spoon halfway to Eno's mouth. He blinked, then looked at me like he expected me to disappear. I didn't move. Instead, I walked toward the door slowly, my breath catching against the cold draft creeping in through the frame. I peeked through the peephole. No one, just silence stretching too long. When I opened it, there was only a shadow at the end of the hallway and a distant elevator ding. I closed the door again, slower this time, and locked it with both hands. That's where it all started. We sat together on the living room floor. Joran had his knees pulled up to his chest. Kaya leaned against the couch, arms tight across her middle. Eno nestled into the corner like a small animal bracing for another winter. I cleared my throat, but my voice came out thinner than I expected. Can you tell me what happened tonight? Joran didn't look up, just swallowed and glanced sideways at Kaya, then Eno. We knocked for a long time. Mom didn't answer. She said if we told anyone, they'd split us up. I didn't react, not out loud, but something inside me shattered, the kind of break you don't hear until you try to stand back up. A child shouldn't have to know how foster care works. Shouldn't use words like split up like it's normal. Looking back now, I should have said something more. Instead, I just nodded like that was an acceptable sentence for a 12-year-old. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I started gathering their wet clothes, shirts clinging to their skin like second layers of shame. Kaya's backpack was soaked at the bottom, the zipper halfway torn. Inside, I didn't find a change of clothes. I found an envelope, yellowed, folded twice, barely holding together. Across the front, free lunch program, District 9. Inside was a form signed by Kaya's teacher, and a handwritten note. Kaya comes to school hungry. She told me she eats more at school than at home. Please reach out. I sat on the floor, the paper in my lap like it might catch fire if I held it too tightly. My fingers curled around the edges. I didn't realize I'd started crumpling it until the creases split the teacher's name in two. Hungry. In a house with granite counters, a Vitamix blender, and clean eating hashtags plastered all over Vera's social feed. Hungry? I didn't say it out loud, but my mouth opened anyway. I eat at school more than at home, Kaya said suddenly, her voice a flat line across the room. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Joran sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood like it owed him an answer. I sat down across from him, careful not to speak first. He spoke without looking up. I tried to make dinner yesterday. I waited. The stove wouldn't turn on. Mom unplugged it, said the bills were too high. He said it like he was telling me what kind of cereal he liked. No anger, no shame, just fact. And somehow that was worse. I felt heat crawl up the back of my neck. Not anger at him, but at myself. Because for years I had kept quiet, convincing myself that Vera was just scattered, not dangerous, that she'd grow out of it, that motherhood would eventually force her to grow up. But it hadn't, and Joran had. I had spent years trying not to judge my sister. It turns out the children had been judging me, wondering why I didn't step in sooner. "Please don't send us back yet," he said. That's where it all started. I made oatmeal, not because they asked, but because it was something I could do with shaking hands. The kind of comfort that doesn't require words. The bowls steamed as I set them down. Kea stared at hers for a second before diving in, quick bites, like someone who knew food could be taken away without warning. Eno's hand moved too fast. I slowed him gently. "You're okay," I said. He didn't look up. Kea tugged my sleeve like a toddler, her voice barely louder than the hum of the heater. "Can we stay just until the sun's up?" I nodded. That was all she needed. I didn't say they could stay longer. I didn't have to. They already knew. That's when the knock came. Not frantic, not gentle, but with the weight of someone who expected to be answered. And I had to decide, open the door or open a new chapter no one could take back. The sound of that knock stayed in my chest long after the hallway went quiet. I didn't open the door again. I waited until the echoes settled into the walls, pretending I wasn't shaking. The children watched me the way hungry birds watch for a warning, heads tilted, breaths small, waiting to see if danger would slide under the door next. I tried to look calm, but my pulse betrayed me. When I stepped back into the living room, Eno had moved closer to the radiator. He cradled a stuffed dinosaur I'd never seen before, matted fur, faded green, missing one eye. The toy didn't belong to my home. It belonged to a child who'd been told to grow up too fast and punished for holding on to anything that reminded him he was still small. That's where it all started. I crouched down and touched the toy lightly. "What's his name?" "Dino," Eno whispered, barely audible. "Mommy said he's for babies." His words hung in the air, fragile as spider silk. I nodded, though something sharp twisted low in my stomach. I lifted Dino from his hands and carried him to the kitchen's sink. The smell of old detergent and food clung to the fabric, a reminder of everything I didn't want to imagine. I turned on the water, warm but not hot, and began to scrub gently. The suds rose around my fingers, turning cloudy with dirt. My hands felt clumsy, too big, too late. Some things aren't meant to be saved, but we try anyway, because we were once someone's Dino too. As the water pooled higher, the drain made a low groaning sound. Resisting, I pressed the plunger, hoping the pipes would open, but the basin filled faster. The plumbing trembled, complaining like an old man waking too early. Just like me, just like this family. Holding on by instinct, not strength. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. When I turned from the sink, Kea stood in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't blink. She stepped closer, one tiny foot dragging as if it weighed too much. "If I mess up," she said, "will you lock me out too?" Her voice was thin, stretched, almost invisible. My hands froze midair, still smelling of dish soap and mildew. I knelt down, eye level with her, hoping she couldn't see how her words carved into me. "No," I said softly. "You're not a mistake. You don't need to be punished like one." She didn't look relieved, just confused, like no one had offered her a reason to believe that before. I wish someone had said that to me when I was her age. I placed my palms on the floor to steady myself, my fingers pressed against the tile, grounding me, reminding me that some truths live in your bones long before they reach your voice. That's where it all started. They settled near the heater again. Joran curled around his siblings instinctively, as if shielding them from whatever the world planned to throw next. I watched them huddle together, a cluster of small bodies holding onto each other because no one else had. My phone buzzed on the counter, a soft vibration that sounded too loud in the quiet apartment. I looked at it, then at the children, then back at it again. This wasn't a moment you walk away from. This wasn't something you talk yourself out of. This was a moment that demanded an answer, even if it cost everything you thought you were protecting. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list, then over my notes app. I'd already saved the number days ago, long before tonight. A habit I didn't want to admit I'd formed. The CPS hotline. I stared at the digits like they were carved into glass. One press would shatter the illusion of family I'd clung to for years. One press would brand me the traitor Vera always accused me of being. Flashback. Years ago, Vera pushing past me in her doorway, rolling her eyes as she said, "Don't talk like you know anything. You don't have kids. You don't get a say." Her door slammed, so hard the frame shook. The sound stayed with me. Tonight, so did her children. My thumb lowered. "This is Talitha Marin," I said when the line connected. My voice was steady, even though my whole body trembled. "I'm calling to report 3 minors in immediate danger." The operator's tone was calm, practiced, almost too gentle. "Ma'am, are the children currently with you?" "Yes," I whispered. "Don't let them leave." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I put the phone down slowly, the weight of it heavier than I'd expected. I didn't lose my family when I made that call. I lost the illusion that I ever really had one. The silence after that phone call felt different. It wasn't the quiet of a home at rest. It was the quiet before something breaks. I stood in the middle of my living room with the operator's words still echoing inside me. "Don't let them leave." It felt like someone had drawn a circle around us, and stepping outside, it would undo whatever fragile protection we'd just managed to create. By afternoon, the storm had rolled in. Snow pressed against the windows in sweeping lines, blurring the world outside. The kids had fallen asleep on the couch, curled against one another like they were afraid the warmth might disappear if they loosened their grip. I slipped on my boots and padded down to the mailroom just to move, to breathe, to keep from replaying that call in my head. That's where it all started. A cardboard box sat inside my mailbox slot. I would have recognized the handwriting anywhere, my own from months ago. I'd mailed that Christmas package before everything went sideways. Before the kids started showing up, hungry, cold, and frightened. The return label had been stamped, refused, as if the gifts themselves were offensive, as if I crossed a line I didn't know existed. I carried the box upstairs and placed it on the kitchen table. The children snored softly behind me. I peeled the tape back and opened the flaps. Everything inside was untouched. The scarves I'd hand knit, The small journals I'd picked out for each of them. The card I'd written, hoping it might matter to someone. She didn't just reject the gifts. She rejected the idea that I mattered at all. My phone vibrated. A message from my cousin flashed across the screen. Vera's crying on Facebook. What did you do? I stared at the words until they blurred. The irony burned. Vera crying on the internet while her own children slept in my small apartment, thawing from a night their mother didn't care enough to stop. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. By 5 o'clock, my phone looked like it had suffered an attack. Group chats exploded, with family members I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly forming a jury. One message from my aunt read, "We don't air dirty laundry in public. You should have kept this inside the family." Inside the family, as if love meant covering for cruelty, as if silence was loyalty, as if opening my door was a betrayal. I held the mug in my hand, so tightly the handle dug into my palm. I didn't destroy the family. I just refused to keep pretending it wasn't already falling apart. Another message came through, this time from Vera herself. "You're not even a mother. Stay in your lane." The words hit with a force I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just cruel, it was calculated, designed to shove me back into a corner I'd spent years trying to climb out of, designed to remind me of everything I wasn't, everything she believed I would never be. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. That's where it all started. Later that evening, I gathered the kids' belongings to wash them. When I picked up Joran's backpack, something heavy shifted inside. A notebook, old, soft-edged, the cover peeling. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was small and pressed hard into the paper. Monday, feed Eno first. Check heat. Don't wake Mom. Put Kaya's blanket in dryer. Keep snacks for later. Remind Kaya to brush teeth. Make sure Eno sleeps on his side. Don't tell anyone. It wasn't a checklist. It was a survival contract, and he signed it in silence. I pressed the book to my chest, as if holding it tighter would somehow pull the pain out of it. My throat ached the way it does when you're trying not to cry, because crying won't fix anything. From a hallway, Joran's voice drifted in. I thought if I wrote it all down, I could keep everyone okay. I turned, but he kept his eyes on the floor, as if afraid I'd think less of him for trying to be the adult his mother refused to be. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. That night, after the kids fell asleep again, I sat by the window and watched snow swallow the streetlights. I didn't answer a single message. I didn't defend myself, even when the pings came in with accusations sharp enough to cut. Instead, I opened my laptop. I created a document. Title, Incident Record, Halloway Children. At the top of the page, I typed, Exhibit A, the night Vera left them outside. 1:04 a.m., freezing conditions. My fingers hesitated for a breath. Then I hit save. If they won't believe me now, they will later. And not because I say so, because the truth is traceable. I wasn't the one who lit the match, but I'll be the one who writes down where the fire started. The cursor blinked on my laptop screen long after I pressed save. I sat there, staring at the words I had typed, Exhibit A, feeling a weight settle over me that didn't quite belong to grief and didn't quite belong to fear. It was something heavier, something final, the kind of feeling that tells you the road ahead no longer has a way back. Outside, the snowfall thickened. The afternoon light dimmed into a gray wash that pressed against the glass like an unwelcome visitor. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and tried to stand. That's when I heard her. Her voice traveled through the storm before I even reached the door. Sharp, unrestrained, familiar in the way pain is familiar, too close, too used to being heard at the wrong times. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Vera stood at the bottom of the building steps, coat unbuttoned, hair damp from snow she hadn't bothered to shake off. She held her phone in her hand like she was ready to film me or fight me, or both. She didn't knock. She didn't even look up before speaking. She simply hurled the words into the cold air as if the wind should carry them straight into my chest. I hope you're happy. Talitha, you want them? Take them. Take all of them. Let's see how long you last. I stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind me. The snow bit at my ankles, but I didn't move, didn't interrupt. Vera continued, her voice cracking under something that wasn't sorrow and wasn't rage, but the twisted place between. You've always wanted to make me look bad. You're jealous. That's what this is. You never had kids, never had a husband, never had anything. So now you want mine. I kept my hands at my sides. My breath fogged the air in small, controlled bursts. I'm not here to win, Vera. I said quietly, I'm here because someone had to stay when you walked away. She laughed, a broken, scoffing sound that reminded me of all the slammed doors from our childhood. They still love me more than they'll ever love you. I turned my back before the words could carve deeper. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. That's where it all started. By the time I returned upstairs, my hands were numb, and the children were still sleeping on the couch. I stepped into the small hallway that led to the kitchen and checked the mailbox slot by habit. A thin envelope rested inside. No return address, no stamp smudges. Inside was a letter written in looping handwriting I recognized from parent-teacher nights. Miss Fenn, Kaya's teacher. I should have reported it. The letter began. I saw her fall asleep in class. I saw her split a half sandwich between herself and her brother. I didn't want to overstep. I failed her. Each sentence felt like a slow confession, a small unraveling of guilt that had lived quietly behind someone else's silence. I sat down at the counter with the letter trembling between my fingers. Tears fell, not from sadness, but from the rare ache of being seen. Not everyone wanted to ignore the truth. Some people were simply too afraid to say it first. I slid the letter into a manila folder marked, supporting evidence. Kaya. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Evening pressed in early, turning the hallway dim when someone knocked, a softer, hesitant tap this time. I opened the door to find Mr. Otis LeClaire, the neighbor across from me, shifting awkwardly with his cap in his hands. I don't mean to intrude, he said. I thought I should say something. He cleared his throat, eyes lowering to his shoes. I saw them once, your sister's kids, sitting outside her door for a long while. I figured she was running late. Didn't think it was my place to step in. His voice cracked on the last word, a mixture of regret and shame. They were outside in the cold. I said gently, Joran still has a cough from it. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I just didn't know what the right thing was. It was your place, I said softly. It always is when a child is standing in the cold. He nodded, a slow, heavy motion, and stepped back toward his door without another word. That's where it all started. After he left, I walked back inside and stood for a moment in the quiet. The kids were awake now, lying beneath thick blankets, blinking up at the ceiling like they were trying to memorize what safety felt like. The room felt heavier than before, filled with truths no one wanted to say aloud. I turned off the harsh overhead light and let the warm glow of a single lamp fill the room. Soft, dim, human. Somewhere beneath the storm, a truth had finally settled. Silence doesn't protect children. It only hides the people hurting them. It's always your place when silence sounds like suffering. The morning after Vera's outburst felt strangely still. The kind of stillness that follows a thunderclap, the silence you brace for, not because it's peaceful, but because you're waiting to hear what cracked. I moved around the apartment like I was wearing someone else's body. Distant, quiet, watching myself function in slow motion. The heater kicked on. A pair of socks tumbled in the dryer. Joran stirred cereal in his bowl long after the milk turned warm. We didn't talk. The house had its own language now, low hums, shared glances, and the muffled thud of footsteps padded with exhaustion. That's where it all started. The clinic hallway smelled like lemon disinfectant and the faintest hint of children's shampoo. Kea sat on the exam table, her feet swinging just above the paper lining, wearing the same red hoodie I'd let her sleep in the night before. She held Dino in her arms, now clean, stitched along one seam like a scar made of care. The pediatrician walked in holding a tablet and didn't speak right away. Her brows pinched together like she'd been preparing the words for hours. She was borderline stage 2 frostbite. She said, finally, her voice measured. Another hour outside, and she could have lost some toes. Maybe more. I didn't react right away. I watched Kea swing her feet gently, humming under her breath. She didn't know. She didn't need to. She's 9, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's 9. And she almost lost her feet because her mother didn't want to answer the door. The doctor didn't respond, just nodded quietly, then handed me a printed copy of the thermal scan and a signed medical summary. I folded the report slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred, like it could break if I touched it too quickly. It didn't just prove something happened. It proved that silence had nearly cost her something she wouldn't have been able to get back. I placed it in the folder labeled Legal Primary Evidence. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. That evening, I sat on the couch with my laptop open and the folder beside me when Joran appeared from his room, holding something small in his hand. I think you should have this, he said. It was a flash drive. Simple, silver, unmarked. He sat down next to me and plugged it in without waiting for permission. It's from the night we got locked out. He said, I didn't know if it would help. The audio opened with the static of wind. Then a voice, his, Mom said don't come back until you grow up. Silence. Then the unmistakable sound of Kea sobbing, her voice shaky, terrified. It's too cold. I want to go home. The air in the room shifted. The walls felt smaller. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I replayed the file twice before dragging it into the evidence folder. This isn't about taking the kids from Vera. This is about making sure no one ever calls what she did parenting. That's where it all started. Later that night, the living room table was buried in paper. Labeled tabs, dated entries, printed emails, scans, screenshots. A timeline of things no one wanted to believe until the right person said them out loud. Joran walked by and paused. He looked at the mess of files, then at me. Are you building a case? I didn't answer right away. I just looked back at him. The weight in my chest heavier than anything I'd ever lifted. Not to punish her, I said, to protect you. He nodded like he already knew that, then handed me a second drive. It's got photos. Kaya's feet, the frostbite, the date and time are saved in the file name. I kept it, just in case. He turned and walked back to his room. I pressed my hand to my forehead. The skin there felt hot. Too hot. My breath caught in my throat for half a second before I exhaled hard. Okay, I whispered. Let's finish this right. Some wounds don't scream. They whisper. And if you're not listening, they bleed anyway. The house felt different after Joran handed me that second flash drive. Heavier, somehow, as if the walls finally understood what they were containing. I sat there for a long moment, breathing through the tightness in my chest. The snow outside softened everything except the truth sitting between us. When I finally stood, something inside me shifted, quiet, firm, irreversible. That's where it all started. The next morning, I had barely poured cereal into bowls when my phone buzzed. A text from a coworker I hadn't spoken to in months. Have you seen her feed? My stomach dropped. People don't ask that unless something ugly is happening in a place designed to hide behind filters. I opened Instagram, and the moment Vera's face filled the screen, my breath caught. Her tears were perfect, her hair perfectly undone. The lighting flattered her, as if she'd practiced crying before going live. They took my kids, she said, voice trembling with rehearsed heartbreak. My own sister betrayed me. Some women just can't stand to see someone else happy. Comments poured in like applause. You're a good mom. You deserve better. They're jealous of you. I felt something cold settle in my spine. She turned my silence into her weapon. She fed strangers a story she hadn't fed her own children. Not one person asked why the kids had left in socks. I closed the app before I said something I'd regret. But when I turned, Joran was standing behind me, eyes fixed on the screen, his shoulders slumped in a way that told me he had seen enough. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. He walked away without a word, and I followed him down the hall. He sat on the edge of the guest bed, the bed that had become his by necessity, not by choice. Books, laundry, half-finished homework assignments lay scattered around him like fragments of a life he hadn't expected to rebuild here. Do you think she really believes what she says? He asked, voice tight, fingers twisting the blanket hem. His question cut deeper than anything Vera had said online. I think she needs to believe it, I answered softly, because the truth might ruin her. He nodded once, looking older than 12, looking tired of choosing which pieces of reality to hold on to and which to let go. A silence hung between us. Not heavy, just honest. Thanks for not sending us back, he murmured. Thanks for staying, I replied. He reached for his laptop, opened it, and clicked on a folder labeled Only for Court. Inside were photos, recordings, timestamps, evidence he shouldn't have known how to gather. Proof, he said simply, just in case they ask again. That's where it all started. 3 weeks passed like a long exhale. Snow melted along the sidewalks. The kids began leaving their shoes by the door instead of carrying them into the living room. Kaya smiled more. Eno started humming to himself when he colored, but Vera never came. Not for her supervised visitation. Not for a phone call. Not for a text asking if the children were okay. I asked Officer Patricia one afternoon, "Is she coming back?" She paused, her tone free of judgment, just firm reality. If she was going to fight, she'd be here. I nodded, even though something inside me splintered. It wasn't a break. It was an acknowledgement, a quiet surrender to truth. She didn't lose them. She forfeited. Sometimes disappearing is the loudest decision a person makes. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. That night, after dinner, Kea crawled onto the couch beside me with her blanket pulled up to her chin. Her voice was tiny, like she was afraid of disturbing something fragile. "Did Mom die?" she asked. I turned toward her slowly, feeling the air shift in my lungs. "No, baby," I whispered. "She just left." Kea nodded, as if she had already figured that out, but needed permission to believe it. The lamp cast a warm circle around us. Joran washed dishes in the kitchen, without being asked. Eno fell asleep on the rug, clutching Dino gently under his chin. The house felt full in a way I hadn't expected. Full and quiet. Quiet doesn't always mean peace, but that night it meant understanding. Not every mother walks away, but some do, and the door doesn't slam. It just stays open long enough for you to realize she's not coming back. Joran didn't say much on the ride to the courthouse. He held the folder tight against his chest like it might blow away if he loosened his grip. His eyes followed the snow tapping gently against the passenger side window, but I knew he wasn't watching the road. He was bracing for something. Maybe I was too. We walked into the lobby without speaking, just the low thump of boots on tile, the hush of old heating vents. People passed us without looking up. All eyes were trained on a hallway that led to a different courtroom. Some local celebrity caught in another scandal. No one noticed the boy with the folder, or the woman who wasn't his mother. Not all stories make headlines. Some just change lives in silence. Courtroom 3B felt colder than the streets outside. The lighting was too bright, sterile. I sat on the left side of the room with Joran beside me and Patricia, our CPS officer, just behind us. Across the aisle, Vera's attorney sat alone. Vera's seat was empty. The judge entered and took her place, adjusting her glasses like she was already tired of what she was about to hear. "Is the biological mother present?" she asked. Vera's lawyer stood. She waved appearance. "Your Honor." There was a pause, the kind that swells with meaning before anyone speaks. I stood and handed over the binder I had prepared. Neatly labeled, tabbed, dated. Inside were CPS reports, medical records, teacher letters, audio files, and photos of frostbitten feet. I didn't try to explain it. I didn't look for sympathy. I just offered the truth, page by page, like someone returning what had always belonged in the light. This wasn't revenge. This was record-keeping for a future that deserved to know the truth. The judge flipped through slowly. Her expression never changed. She didn't offer comfort, didn't nod. She just read. I realized in that moment how badly I had wanted someone to react, to frown, to wince, to acknowledge the wrong that had been done. But the courtroom doesn't ask if it hurts, only if it's true. We were told to return later for the ruling. By 4:30, the room was nearly empty again. Joran sat with his hands in his lap, his shoes scuffed at the toe from kicking at the baseboard. Patricia leaned forward slightly, her notepad balanced on one knee. I tried to breathe evenly, but my throat had its own rhythm, a slow choke I couldn't control. The judge returned, stood, spoke. This court grants full legal custody to Miss Talitha Marin. I didn't move. Joran let out a breath like he'd been holding it for months. Kea, seated behind us with Eno, began to cry quiet, sharp sobs that came from somewhere she hadn't let anyone see. I closed my eyes, not in relief, not in triumph, in exhaustion. I didn't win. I stayed. And sometimes that's what the children need most. The next morning, I opened Instagram out of habit. Vera's profile was blank. No photos, no videos, no followers. The name had been deleted, the account gone. No apology, no announcement, just absence. I stared at the screen, then powered the phone off and set it aside. Kea came into the kitchen a few minutes later, holding a piece of paper in both hands like it might tear if she breathed too hard. I made something, she said, laying it on the fridge. It was a drawing, a stick figure with curly hair holding 3 smaller figures. Above them, in crayon, was one word written in block letters: home. I reached for a magnet and pinned it in place. For the first time in months, I smiled. The judge gave me custody, but the kids gave me something bigger. They came back every night, even when they didn't have to. After I pinned Kea's drawing to the fridge, I stood there for longer than I meant to, my hand still hovering near the magnet, as if letting go would undo something sacred. The room behind me buzzed gently with the small sounds of life. Eno humming under his breath, Joran flipping pages, the kettle starting to hiss on the stove. The kind of domestic hum that says, you're safe, you're home. And yet, I still caught myself glancing toward the door. The porch light was still on. Not for Vera, not anymore. But the habit had settled into my bones, and I wasn't ready to let it go. That's where it all started. Eno pressed his forehead to the frosted window, tracing lazy circles in the fog his breath left behind. Kea sat on the floor, folding a fresh load of laundry, her movements deliberate, almost meditative. She lined up socks by color, by length, by warmth. Across the room, Joran scrolled through his phone, soft music playing low from its speaker. Nothing loud, nothing meant to hide anything. The house was quiet, but it wasn't scared anymore. It was tired. So were we. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. That evening, after the dishes were done and the kids had disappeared into their rooms, Joran emerged holding a steaming mug of tea. He didn't say anything when he handed it to me. He just sat down on the other side of the table and waited. Thanks for opening the door, he said, voice calm, almost too calm. I swallowed, unsure what to say back. You didn't knock because you thought I'd fix it, I finally said. No, he replied. We knocked because we thought you'd listen. I set the tea down. I didn't drink it. I just held the mug, felt the heat seep into my palms like it was trying to convince me I'd done something right. I didn't rescue them. I received them. And sometimes that's the greater act. He stood up and walked away, left me there with the tea cooling between my hands. I held it like memory, like apology. That's where it all started. Weeks passed. The snow began to recede in slow patches, revealing the dead grass beneath. Vera didn't call. She didn't show. She didn't file. No appeal. No apology. No explanation. One morning, I opened the mailbox to find a government envelope forwarded from an address I hadn't written down in years. Inside, a notarized declaration. Simple. Cold. I waive all parental rights, effective immediately. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like abandonment signed in ink. Even the goodbye didn't come from her hand. That night, I didn't cry, but I didn't sleep either. I lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, wondering if silence could ever feel like closure. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. A week later, I hung a new photo on the wall above the kitchen table. Kea blinked. Eno's sweater was inside out. Joran wore the half smile he'd been learning how to use again. We weren't perfect, but we were all in the frame. Kea stood beside me, arms crossed. I look weird. You look like yourself, I said. She grinned and added a second magnet to hold the photo straighter. Joran stepped in behind her and placed a sticky note beneath the photo. In all caps, he had written, "We are not a rescue project. We are a reassembly." I read it twice. Let the words land. Let them reshape something inside me. She disappeared, but they stayed. And I did too. We didn't survive her absence. We became something in it. They didn't choose me because I was perfect. They chose me because I didn't leave. Before we close this story, I just want to say this. Sometimes being family isn't about blood. It's about showing up when no one else does. It's about staying when someone else walks away. If you've ever been the one who stayed, quietly, patiently, just know this. They may not say it, but they remember. What about you? Have you ever been the one who stayed? Or the one who had to walk away? If this story moved you, leave a comment, share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak where words usually fall short.